Welcome to my channel. I'm Gary Wiryawan, and today I wanna talk a little bit about my observation and evaluation of my camera gear that I brought on my previous travel. Let's go! Before we continue with today's video, if you are a current subscriber of my channel, welcome back and thank you always for your support. I hope that you will enjoy today's video. And if you are a new viewer of my channel, also welcome. I hope that you will enjoy today's video. If you're into photography, micro four thirds camera gear, lenses, and also filmmaking, also, if you're into music, home recording, guitar, rock, metal, that kind of stuff, please consider subscribing to my channel. And now let's continue with today's video. As we all know, travel is very cumbersome. There are weight restrictions and you cannot carry too much or you will be charged. And it gets even more complicated if you are carrying camera gear. So when it comes to travel, you have to be very considerate and be very purposeful with the gear that you are carrying with you on that trip. For me personally, I want to be very effective when I travel, and I obsess a lot about my camera gear selection, especially my lenses when it comes to travel, because I want to have the right balance and combination between image quality, performance, size, weight, and ability to cover focal lengths that I need. Because bringing the wrong lenses can ruin your photography chances during travel. If you don't bring the right focal length, you cannot cover your object properly. And if you bring too much lenses, you'll weigh yourself down and you'll become not as effective. Speaking of focal length, you can check my previous video about micro four thirds focal lengths up here on the card, where I talk about micro four thirds focal lengths in general and how to correctly choose them. Now, I just went back from Bali, Indonesia for a family vacation and just a little bit of relaxation time. I made a vlog of the trip. You can check it out here. And yeah, basically, I just want to share my observation and evaluation of the camera lenses that I bring on that trip. Anyway, the purpose of this video is so that I can learn better from my trip to Bali for my next trip so that I can bring the correct lenses. And hopefully you will also be able to gain important information from this video that you can use for your next trip. Originally, for my Bali trip, I wanted to bring this lens right here that's recording this video right now, the Panasonic 12 to 35mm f2.8 and a couple of other lenses. However, I ended up bringing 4 lenses. All of them are prime lenses on that trip. And I think all of these lenses that I brought during the trip really perform wonderfully. And this could be a benchmark for my next trip. Speaking of the lenses, the lens that I used the most during the Bali trip is this guy right here. No surprise at all, the Panasonic Leica 15mm f1.7. The reason is very simple, because it is very lightweight, it is very small, so I can carry it easily, and when being used with my camera, it is also not too cumbersome. I really love the fact that the focal length is very flexible. It's not too tight, it's not too wide, it's just perfect. It is very flexible for all sorts of different kinds of photography genre, including street photography, environmental portrait, tighter landscape shot, food photography. Also, it really did well for video, especially for capturing B-rolls. I also brought this guy right here, the Panasonic Lumix 20mm f1.7. And on my previous packing video, I was asking you guys which one should I bring, the 15 or the 20, and I ended up bringing both. Initially, I didn't use this lens as much as the 15mm simply because I think it is a little bit too tight for general everyday kind of use during the trip. However, on my last day of the trip, I forced myself to only use this lens and ditch the 15 behind. And the result is very interesting, and I become more appreciative toward this lens because the increase of focal length from 15mm to 20mm really makes the subject pops even more. I can get shallower depth of field and the subject stands out more when compared with 15mm, and it really shows when it comes to food photography. So for my next trip, I will consider bringing 20mm if I wanna make my subject pop even more. Next lens, ultra wide angle lens. I really love ultra wide angle, especially for travel, because it enables me to capture so many things in the frame with just a single lens. And I brought this guy right here, the Laowa 7.5mm f2. It has a really large aperture of f2 and a small size which is relatively lightweight, which is very unusual and rare for ultra wide angle lens. So I've been really enjoying this lens so much. I use it for environmental portrait, I use it for sceneries mostly, and I also got a chance to use it few times to practice ultra wide angle landscape photography on the beach, especially using long exposure ND filters. And I use the KNF concept filter, which I have a review video about it up here. You can check it out. But basically the KNF concept ND filters really work well and I'm really happy with the result. Next lens, telephoto lens. I'm not really a telephoto kind of guy. I much prefer wide angle lenses because I think they are more useful and they are used more often during travel. However, telephoto lens can be quite useful when it comes to travel, especially for tighter landscape and for portrait if you want to get background blur, and also for close encounter wildlife, as well as if you want to photograph something that is a little bit far away. And for that purpose, I bring the Olympus 45mm f1.8 for my Bali trip, and I used it a few times to capture a tighter landscape as well as for a little bit of portrait, and it's been performing quite well. As I mentioned earlier, all of these lenses, they are all prime lenses, meaning that they only have single focal length for each lenses. And why I don't just take a single super zoom lens like the 14 to 140mm or a zoom lens with large aperture like the 12 to 35mm f2.8 is because I want to be more involved with the photography process rather than just focusing on the result during this trip. I want photography to be my enjoyment time, my fun time, my play time, alright? So I want to be able to play around with the focal length, and having single focal length on each lenses means that I can get more acquainted with each focal length deeper so that I can better pre-visualize each focal length on these lenses. For example, I use 15mm a lot on this trip, and that means that right now I can totally see 15mm easily with my eyes. This is 15mm and this is 45mm and this is 7.5mm. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I can just easily see, I can just easily frame with my eyes, and I can already know that this tight is 15mm. Something like that. I hope that you understand what I'm saying. Now I want to briefly mention about destination. So as you might know, Bali is kind of an urban kind of destination, meaning that you will encounter lots of architecture, culture and people. So the kind of photography that you will encounter are mostly food photography, street photography, portrait and sceneries, and also architectural interior kind of photography. It's very different from places to places, but I think Bali is more urban kind of destination. And in that case, I really think that prime lenses really works well for urban kind of destination because each prime lens can have its own category of photography. For example, I use the 15mm more for street photography and food photography. I use 45mm if I want to photograph tighter landscape. I use 20mm if I want to photograph a tighter kind of street photography as well as food photography, and the 7.5mm for wide sceneries. By using separate lenses for separate photography category, you can focus more on that category using single lenses and therefore maximizing your effectiveness of photography and getting better result in the end. However, when the destination is more nature kind of destination like Iceland, New Zealand or Switzerland, I really think that zoom lens will be better for that destination. By using zoom lens on nature kind of destination, you'll be able to become more flexible and you'll become to adapt to the objects that you want to photograph, especially things like landscape photography or wildlife photography that you will usually encounter in nature kind of destination. Anyway, I'm quite happy with my gear selection for my Bali trip. I really think that I choose the right lenses for the trip. It's a 6-day trip and I shot at around 100 or maybe 200 photos, which are not that high. Usually for 5 days or 6 days trip, I will shoot at around 1000 or maybe 2000 pictures and only got about 80 or 100 keeper. This time I shot at around 100 or 200 as I mentioned before, and I got about 100 keepers, which are quite a lot. Also, I am very grateful that I've been able to learn, especially when it comes to lenses selection from my Bali trip, and hopefully for my next trip I can become even more effective than my Bali trip, and hopefully I can bring the correct lenses and avoid burdening myself down with bringing too much gear, especially unnecessary camera gear or lenses. So that is all for today's video. I hope that this video has been useful for you. Please comment down below what lenses that you will bring on your next trip. Also, if you have any questions about this video, comment down below as well and I will try my best to answer. Also, don't forget to support my small channel by liking this video, sharing this video and subscribing to my channel down below. It will really help me a lot to motivate me to keep making these videos for you.